Hi guys. I want to talk to you today about the Yerkes-Dodson Law. Share my screen here. Okay. So, um, I saw in your book that there is a brief description of this law or rule, or it has various names, but um, I wanted to go into a little bit more detail because I really do feel like it can help you personally as students and sort of as people be more efficient and learn a little better. So I do feel like it's something we really need to discuss. This first slide reiterates what is in your book already. Okay, so here's the curve. On the y-axis here, we have learning capacity, so from 100% to 0%. On the x-axis, we have the low arousal to high arousal. And then I just wanted to illustrate that a little bit. So low arousal would be like asleep. High arousal would be, panic attack, something like that. And then this little guy in the middle denotes the peak of learning capacity. So basically, this law is very simple. What it says is in this space here in the middle that I've so messily highlighted, this is the area where you're most likely to be able to learn. So, you're not at the lowest arousal level, you're not at the highest arousal level, you are in the middle. If you think about what that looks like in real life, you're not asleep, but you're not really stressing out. You're just kind of focused, you're present, you're there. Okay. So, like I said, it's very simple. Psychology has a lot of theories. It doesn't have a lot of laws. The reason why you can refer to this as a law is because it stands up, because of its simplicity, it stands up so easily to testing and confirmation. So, very few laws, but this is certainly one of them. Some of the things that mitigate how this curve looks for different folks. It does not always look like this perfect little bell curve that I've drawn here. I have not drawn the individual curves for all of these 4 mitigating factors. I just don't want to confuse the issue too much, but I do want to cover them a little bit. So skill level. Folks with higher skill levels can handle higher arousal. So what does that mean? So basically, if you are really good at what you're doing, you can do it when you are more stressed out. So task familiarity. So similarly, but slightly different, if you are very familiar with the task, not necessarily that you're very good at it, but that you're very familiar with what it is that you have to be doing, you actually require a higher level of arousal to reach optimum performance, to do it your best. So in other words, if you are a factory worker and you do the same thing over and over and over and over again, you're going to get to the point where you're kind of going to slow down and not do it as well. You need a little bit more arousal. You need to be a little bit more on the side of stress in order to perform at your best. For personality, so extroverts and introverts, just very, very briefly, extroverts get their restoration energy from going outside of themselves, interacting with people, that sort of thing. Introverts do exactly the opposite. They get their restoration from being alone. It has nothing to do with your personality. It has nothing to do with how big a personality you have. That is a myth. It's all about how you get your restoration. Anyway, they perform differently with more or less stimulation in exactly the way that you would expect. So extroverts can handle more stress and do okay. Introverts can do pretty well with more on the kind of sleepier end here. Task complexity. So difficult or complex tasks require lower level of arousal for motivation. So basically, if it's really complicated, you don't need to be stressed out. It's not particularly helpful to be stressed out. It's a little better to be on the quieter end there. But if you have a task that requires a lot of time to do, you need to really like buckle down and devote a lot of effort and time into it, then it is helpful to have a little more arousal. Okay. So one thing I want to point out here that is actually really important is that it's a curve, right? So John and Jane have the same functional level, but for different reasons. You know, they're both performing at 50% capacity, but John is performing at 50% capacity because he's not aroused enough. Jane is performing at 50% capacity because she is too aroused. And they're going to need different solutions to improve their performance. You know, like it's not going to work for Jane to you know, increase her arousal. That's going to bring her performance even further down. But for John, you know, if you decrease his arousal, again, he's just going to go deeper into sleep. Okay, so the point is that if you remember how this works, you can always find a path to your best performance. So identifying whatever your style of underperformance happens to be is sort of negative way to put it, but it's important to figuring out how to address it. So, you know, you probably have a pretty good idea of which side of this you fall on in any one given situation. And it doesn't have to be the same all the time. It probably isn't the same all the time. You know, if you're particularly adept at math and not particularly adept at languages, you know, it's going to be a little bit different for you. So identifying what your style is and where on this curve you lay is going to be really key to figuring out how to address it. If in general you tend to lose focus and get bored easily, or just require a lot to be going on to hold your attention, you're going to have to know that you need to stick to more high stimulation classes, jobs, etc. You know, if you are that kind of person, you are probably going to be struggling a little bit with, say, an entire semester of remote learning. But if you're somebody who doesn't find focus very difficult, is more on the introverted end, doesn't need a lot of stimulation to stay engaged, then it's probably easier than it is if you do an entire semester face-to-face. So on the other hand, if you tend to get nervous and then lose focus, or you get distracted by other thoughts and priorities, you need to figure out how to calm your mind and clear it a little bit so that you can focus on what you're doing, especially in high stress situations. So how to actually do all of that is a different day, but essentially that is what this law is about. There is a lot of research out there about it. It would make a wonderful paper topic if you are interested in that. So if you have any further questions on this, feel free to ask me at any time. I will be happy to answer them. All right, thank you.